Good morning. Welcome to Member Focus Monday. I'm Christina Schaefer, Director of Social Media for HAR, and I am joined this morning by a very familiar face to the Houston Realtor community, Rob Cook. Welcome, Rob.
Well, good morning, and thank you for having me on. This is one of my passions, talking about contracts.
Yes, I know. We talked a little bit last week about this, and you had a lot of good things to share, a lot of mistakes that you're seeing. So we want to make sure that everybody gets to hear that today. Before we get into that, if you could, Rob, for anybody who doesn't know who you are yet, if you could tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, well, I'm a head broker here in the city of Houston. I got my license in 1979. I'm your past chairman for the Houston Association of Realtors. I'm also past chair for the Texas Real Estate Commission Education Standards Advisory Committee. But I played a lot of roles with HAR. I've been the MLS chairman on 3 occasions, risk reduction. Same thing at the state level. I've served on professional standards for Texas Realtors since 1995. I've chaired that committee in 2014. 2015, you all honored me by naming me Realtor of the Year. 2016, I was the chair for the risk reduction for the state and served on the NAR risk reduction. So I'm very background of volunteerism, and I think that volunteering is such a passion because I actually get so much more back. I mean, how many other times do you get to go hang out with Bob Hale and people in the industry at a national level? So I mean, it's just a really exciting thing. So we talked about this prior to the show. Is about the voting is today. It ends at 5 p.m. Get out there and vote. We have an industry that is, again, a dynamic industry. It's changing significantly right before our eyes, and we need the leaders going to keep HAR on the forefront. So it's an important thing. It's your industry to keep or to lose. That's simple.
Yeah, very good. Thank you, Rob, for mentioning that. As Rob said, today is the last day to vote for the 2022 Board of Directors. If you're watching this on Monday, today is the last day, and it ends at 5 p.m. So I'm sure we can put information about that in the comments. If anybody has not voted yet, you want to make sure you check your email, look for that email, and vote before 5 p.m. today. Something else I should mention before we get into this, Rob, and we talk about some of the things you're seeing, is that there's another special thing happening today, and that is registration is opening for this year's virtual Engage conference. So we can also post a link for that in the comments in a little bit. But registration for that opens today as well. So a busy day for us.
And last year we were so concerned because we thought, oh gosh, we can't get together in person. And I think it was almost fourfold the number of people that joined it on a virtual level as opposed to being in live. So you got to virtually engage a lot more people.
Absolutely, and it's open to all Texas realtors, so spread the word. So let's go ahead and get into it, Rob. I'm curious, and I know you mentioned a lot of them, but there's some specific ones that we want to dive into today. So what are the top mistakes or biggest mistakes that you're seeing on contracts lately?
Well, the number one error, and this is according to TREC, is people leaving off the executed date. And I had somebody do it the other day. They'd sent it over to their mortgage company, and the first thing the person with the mortgage processor had to do is call them up and say, look, we don't have any executed date. And of course, they're not going to put it on there. It has to be done by the broker because it says right there on the broker signs it, but often left off. And that's a time-sensitive document. So you want to make sure you get that date in there because that's, that day is day 0, and you start counting. The next day is day 1, and start counting from there. So I see a lot of those things like that.
Okay.
Additionally, how money is being handled, and we've got it actually simpler nowadays because everything goes to the title company. And then an agent called me last week and said, look, it's day 5 and we still don't have earnest money or option money. And they said, we're running out of our option period. And I go, well, you don't have an option period. The money didn't get there in a timely fashion. So I see a lot of that. There is a program out there, and I'm not soliciting anything, and I make no money off this. There's a program called ZOCCAM out there, ZOCCAM, and you can virtually send that money to the title company, and most title companies are embracing it. And I actually had a dear friend of mine, we were sitting at lunch, and he said, I got to drive across town and take this option money and earn this money over to the title company. I said, why are you doing that? And I said, did you heard of ZOCCAM? He goes, what? And he called the title company and said, "Do you all accept Zochem?" Not only did they accept it, they were delighted he was going to do it that way. You think about, COVID was a challenge for us, but you know what?
Mm-hmm.
Technology has been improved so much. It's making you more efficient out there.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's no reason for money not to get to the title company timely. We do have some timelines that you have to be careful when counting those days. It's 3 calendar days
Mm-hmm.
to get it to the. And so the way the contract reads, it's in paragraph 5, that if the third day is a Saturday, Sunday, or legal holiday, that it goes back to the next day that's not a Saturday, Sunday, or legal holiday. And I always use an example when I teach my contracts class, is that if you wrote a contract on Thursday, that's day 0. Day 1 would be Thursday, day 2 would be Saturday, day 3 would be Sunday. So you would take it to the title company on Monday. And of course, we just had 4th of July, and even though the 4th is on a Sunday, the 5th was a federal holiday. So if you wrote it on Thursday, you'd be taken to the title company on Tuesday. So you do have a lot of time there, but it still seems to be a challenge to get that money there timely. And so I'm seeing a lot of that out there.
Yeah.
Additionally, we have some things with, we'll go ahead to paragraph 6.
Okay.
There was a place in there about the T47 and the survey.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't say or the survey, but on the first line it says that the seller is delivered to the title company and to the buyer, the survey and the T47.
Mm-hmm.
Then the next line says if the survey or T47 are not there within that time frame that it was negotiated, then the buyer shall obtain a new survey at the seller's expense. And I know, and I got testimony from a title company, is essentially saying, they've seen a lot of agents end up paying for it because their sellers didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
They're sending over the survey, they're not sending over the T47. And they got to be together, like salt and pepper. They got to travel together. And to be a T47, it's a sworn statement, an affidavit. It would have to be notarized. And so what I recommend to agents at that point in time is don't let your seller accept an offer unless you have that both in your hands. Then I had an agent call me one time and said, and actually called me another matter on it. And then she explained to me that they didn't have the T47 or the survey, and they checked off that they were going to supply it. So be careful on those particular items. It may end up costing you as the agent if you didn't explain it to your seller that this is what has to happen. Or, you could negotiate, hey, just get a new survey. Because if you dial back years ago, that's what we did in our contracts. Buyer just got a new survey at the buyer's expense.
Yeah.
So,
we had a couple comments coming in. Rob, Rhonda said some title companies don't allow payments this way. I choose where we close based on the title company's ability to accept via Zochem.
And that is a correct statement because some of them have not embraced it yet. But I think that the ones that do it's certainly going to make your job easier, or your buyer's job. And they can download the app on their phone. And I have not physically been to a bank since March of last year. I just take my phone, got my bank app, take a picture of the front, take a picture of the back, and it's in.
Yeah.
So let's make your job easier and more efficient, and
Absolutely.
keep your buyers from driving across town, or you driving across town. It just makes a whole lot of sense. And thank you for those comments too, by the way.
Karina also said a lot of title companies are now doing wire or using an app to pay for the earnest and option. So again, more and more of these companies are kind of adapting to this, and so that's good news.
And embrace technology. I mean, look how Zoom has changed everybody's life. And I've got to be honest with you. I bought a new car in January of last year. I don't even have 7,000 miles on it yet. Everything's on Zoom. And you as agents out there have become a lot more efficient in Zoom. And I remember T. Risby, one of the most amazing developers of technology that I know. I don't think he ever sleeps, but because of the T, we were able to do virtual open houses. So immediately, without drawing a breath, we were able to get up there and stay ahead of the market. So anytime you can use them in technology to improve and be a better agent, and it's actually going to get the public, they're going to have a better perception of being professional too. Hey, look how easy this was. And that's what we want for them.
Absolutely. So what other mistakes are you seeing, Rob?
One of my pet peeves is special provision. That's paragraph 11. And people, it's an amazing bunch of people. realtors are very creative, but they like to be creative in special provisions. And a lot of times I see them practicing law. And there's the first rule of special provisions is if there's an addendum for it, it can't be in special provision, period. End of story. But I see people writing things like, whatever offer you get in, we're going to pay, $1,000 over that offer. And that's still being done. Or they'll be talking about appraisals, and we have an appraisal addendum now that we can use to kind of protect the buyers from that. But they'll create action items, and something like, and I remember there was an article in Texas Realtor Magazine. They used a seller to put sod in the yard prior to closing. Mm-hmm. Well, anything like that should be in 7D2. That would be where the buyer buys that property as is, provided seller does something. And then all the language, about timelines and about defaults and all that's already in there. But if you start creating agreements like that in special provisions, you're probably practicing law. Mm-hmm. And one of the examples I use in a legal update, which I teach very often, is the little story they got the TREC found these in special provision. The sale is contingent on the buyer selling their boat. I mean, you created a contingency. So whatever you write, if it creates a contingency, most likely you're probably practicing the law. Now, I do get a lot of people who, one with the challenge the other day, and I had to think about it. I said, that's probably okay, because you can make written statements, not agreements to do something. And she said, look, I was able to get my offer accepted because I wrote, buyer will not ask for repairs, and put that on. So I thought for a moment. I said, you know what, that really is just a statement. Mm-hmm. Seller's making a claim. I'm not going to ask you for any repairs. And she strongly felt that that's how she got that transaction. So,
wow.
And right now, of course, what we're also jammed up against is if we're ready to talk about this big subject, which is the appraisal addendum. Mm-hmm. I've actually got a copy sitting right next to me, but I don't.
Okay. We actually have a question that came in about the appraisal addendum too, and we have another question let me get to really quick, Rob. Deborah said, she said, this is for the special provisions. May I say seller to provide clue report during option and thorough house cleaning of all surfaces, including cabinet interiors?
Well, the clue report, typically what I have is I have a great relationship with the real estate agent. And of course, your buyer probably does too. I have them get with their real estate agent because they're going to probably give them other advice of things that might impact the cost of that insurance policy. So there's many factors that impact it. But anytime it's about a thorough house clean, I would probably put that in 7D too. I'll buy the house is, provided seller has the house cleaned. Mm-hmm. And maybe even put a cap on it and what company you want to use. And I'll tell you what happened anecdotally. I had somebody who wrote in special provision has to be professionally cleaned. Mm-hmm. And it was our company who had the listing, and the buyer's agent calling it was pretty unhappy. She goes, we're not happy. And so I go in there and talk to the listing agent. I said, well, and even before I can start talking, she goes, we're not doing it anymore, we're done. I go, I said, well, tell me what happened. He said, well, they have to be professionally clean, and the owners have their maid clean the house. Well, that's a professional. That's how that person makes their money. And so I always want to be very clear about what my expectations are, especially in 7D2. I'll buy the house is, provided seller does something. Be very specific. Mm-hmm. They probably have a cleaning company in mind. And again, from the seller side, I'd make sure there's a cap on that. But if I asked you for a dishwasher, I've just put it into 7D2 to provide seller something dishwasher. What kind of dishwasher are you going to buy me? The cheapest one Sam Wholesale has on sale today. And I didn't even say new dishwasher, did I? Same with like, what kind of roof am I putting on? Mm-hmm. Be very specific in there. You may have to get another sheet of paper to continue 7D2 about being specific.
Okay.
So those are just my hands. But Deborah, I don't think what you're asking for it's wrong. Mm-hmm. You're asking for something as far as that. But the thorough house cleaning, I probably would put under 7D2.
Okay. Nellie had a question as well. What about when the buyer tells you they want to have an expiration to the offer? This offer expires in 48 hours.
Well, think about it at this point. What is required of an executed contract? All parties have to sign it, right? So when you send it over there, the expiration, it really doesn't mean anything at that point in time. It's just a conversation. to be an executed contract, both the parties have to sign it. I mean, all parties have to sign it. And at that point, when you're talking about expiring, only the buyer signed it. So it's not nothing that's enforceable.
Okay.
But under our rules and stuff, you can withdraw an offer at any time you want. You can do it with an email if you want to.
Okay.
Anytime prior to execution.
Okay. Sherry asked, what about on a lease? Can I put in special provisions where to pay via Venmo?
I think that's okay as a statement. It's not an agreement of any kind. This is where you make your payment. I think that's perfectly fine.
Okay. Is a buyer legally required to include a contingency provision? Letter from lender states it's a condition, but buyer is understanding, willing, and able to accept the risk.
Oh, you're talking about a contingent. We have it under, we have a third-party financing addendum. That's where the contingency is. And so, you have a certain number of days to remove all conditions, and that's a negotiable number of days, and that's where that would be that third-party financing addendum.
Okay. We have somebody who's been in your classes before. Patty says, during your Legal 1 and Legal 2 classes, you mentioned that listing agents requesting appraisal waiver, no option period or specific instructions on option period days, monies, etc., is acting as an auctioneer. Why are agents still allowed to insert this language in agent remarks?
Well, it's like enforcement. Nobody's complaining. Okay. And here's what the Legal 1 said. If the only variable is the price, you're inadvertently running an auction. It requires an auctioneer's license. That's right out of the Legal 1 update. Thank you to remember, Patty. But it's still being done. And here's the thing buyers agents are faced with. Your job is to make sure you get your buyer what they want. And you're going, well, yeah, they want this, want this. And then guess what's going to happen if you don't do that? Your offer is going to go to the bottom of the stack. Even though it shouldn't. I mean, it's actually, if you look at the Code of Ethics, the Article 3, how we're supposed to cooperate with our other agents, but it's not a perfect world. We are dealing with human beings, and they often make decisions like, well, if you don't want to do what I asked, you know what, your offer is not going to be considered. Yeah, I had someone the other day said they were surveilling their buyers and stuff like that, and the buyers made an ugly comment, and they made a decision, well, you know what, we're not even going to consider that offer. So that's what's happening right now. The listing agents are kind of in the catbird seat, as we say, but the market will correct and they will change. So all you buyers agents out there, relax. It'll change at some point in time. Just not today.
Just not today. That's right. So a couple more things coming in. Connie said, for residential leases, how and where do you communicate the tenant selection criteria?
As far as residential leases, the tenant selection criteria, I'm not exactly certain what you were talking about. The tenant selection of are you talking about the criteria? Oh, I got you. Okay, I'm with you now. Okay, you're talking about the owner's criteria. And there are some forms out there. Is that you have to, of course, avoid anything that might be a fair housing violation, but you communicate it. A lot of people upload it on the MLS. This is the owner's criteria to rent this property. You have to have a 620 FICO score or better. You have to have 3 years of work experience, or work at your job, make 4 times around that, whatever it might be. No smoking, no pets. At your criteria. I tell people to upload it or make sure they get it in advance, because if you take an application fee from them and they don't know what the criteria is, you're really required to give that application fee back to them if you turn them down. So. Okay. Good question, though.
Yeah. So let's get back into some of the contract mistakes that you were mentioning. You mentioned the appraisal addendum. Do you want to get into that?
Yes, let's get it. We actually have been using this since 2018. It came in November, and it was designed to modify the third-party financing addendum. And at some point, that's not always been explained, or people didn't understand it. And I'll give you an example. There's a buyer who was told by his mortgage purchaser, well, you're completely approved, all we need is the appraisal. And the buyer said, oh, no, I waived the appraisal. They thought they didn't have to have an appraisal because they waived it. And so the agent could not have explained what that means. That means you're waiving your right under paragraph 2B of the third-party financing addendum. In other words, if it doesn't appraise, dismisses appraisal by $100,000, you don't have that contingency anymore. The second one, that's a full waiver. And someone had told me that was operating in Austin said they're not even accepting anything unless you waive the appraisal. I think it's dangerous because we've had some misses. I had again, it's not my file, it's not even our company's file, but it was a file that they missed appraisal by $140,000. Of course, they did not use that appraisal, but had that used the waiver, that would have been catastrophic for that buyer. So I mean, our job as a buyer's agent is to protect our buyers. Mm-hmm. And so I don't like that first one, to be honest with you, unless your buyer is super strong, has lots of cash left over, and that might work. The partial waiver is the one that I think makes the most sense. It's like, you know what, you're asking $400,000 for this house, but I really want it. I'll pay you $420,000, but it has to appraise for at least the asking price, $400,000. And that's just an example. It doesn't have to be the asking price. But what you're doing is you're setting a threshold. It has to appraise for at least this for me to buy it. Now, if it only appraised for $395,000, you still have your right to terminate for not meeting underwriter's guidelines. So that makes sense. I hope that makes sense to everybody. And the last one is interesting from the standpoint. This is usually going to be someone that's putting down a lot of money, and it doesn't meet appraisal, but they're putting down so much money they still meet the underwriter's guidelines. So you might want this is an additional right to terminate that was given to you in paragraph 2B of the third-party financing addendum. And so if I'm buying a $500,000 house and I said it's going to appraise for at least $495,000 and only appraises for $490,000, I'll have a right to terminate even though I still qualify under that on that loan application because I'm putting down $250,000. Mm-hmm. So hopefully that kind of makes clear things up. But it has to be understood, and more importantly, it has to be explained to the buyers. This poor buyer thought he had waived the appraisal. I don't need that anymore. Yeah. So that's kind of an interesting thing. Okay. And so let's talk about timelines because when we're on the third-party financing, there's some timelines on that paragraph 2B. Mm-hmm. And what happened? That one property that missed by $100,000 and some odd $1,000, the lender sent over say did not meet underwriter's guidelines, and there's not but 3 days to do a termination before the closing. And this came in on Monday, and it was going to close on Thursday. Well, the buyer's agent did not send over a termination, and it ended up costing her buyer $8,000. Hmm. So that's watching those timelines for the time to get the money there. And I like that person's comment about work with people who will help you get it there, which is people who use electronics to get money to the title company. But watch those timelines. I had people who were missing. I remember one. This has been a couple of years. We were the listing agent, and we had this buyer whose agent basically ghosted her. She had no idea about her money up. She was at risk of losing her earnest money, and her agent wasn't around to find it. And she'd already passed all of her timelines. Hmm. And we're on the seller side, so what do? You had to be fair and honest with them. That's required by our license and our code of ethics both. But we represent the seller in those situations. So always be careful about those timelines. It's not just when I get around to it. It's follow them closely and perform them. That's what your clients want from you, and that's what they should get. Part of the professional candidate's professional ethics, is integrity. So competency is a big portion of what you owe to your client, and knowing these forms, knowing how they operate, is quintessential to your business. And the reason I wrote that class, I wrote it in 2010, is I realized some people out there were not getting trained. And I thought, we need to make this general person, if you can love me or hate me. But on the ESAC, when I chaired it, that's when we pushed through the commission to have a class, a 3-hour contract-related class. It didn't have to be the 1 to 4. Mm-hmm. Because it's very important that you understand the mechanics of a contract, not just knowing your market, but understand how to put together an offer. And I have a feeling these people who are online right now aren't those people. These are the ones that are showing up. They're getting additional education. They want to learn. They're thirsty for the information. Mm-hmm. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the ones that aren't here online.
Yeah, we did have a lot of questions, some comments and some questions coming in as well. So I want to make sure that we can get to as many of these as possible. And if you have any other questions for Rob, go ahead and type them in now. I'm backing up a little bit. Patricia said, what about FHA and VA with appraisal waivers?
The addendum is only for conventional.
Okay.
It is, we have, there is a place in there on third-party financing about FHA and VA median appraisal. The language is already in there. So the appraisal waiver are only for conventional loans.
Okay. Very good. Gwen said, for residential leases, which addendum can you use to put in lease like oil stains from vehicles to be removed by tenant at tenant's expense?
You could probably, you're talking about the tenant's going to remove it?
Yes, so this would say that the tenants would be removing any stains.
Okay. Well, I guess that by agreement they can do that.
Mm-hmm.
And something like that might, like I said, I hate things in special provision, but if it's a landlord, if they are the principal, they can write up things like that where we're kind of limited to what we're allowed to do. So you might get with the owners and say, look, write what you want, what you expect, and let's put it in a separate form and include it that way. So that's a great, maybe good question, actually.
Yeah. Ruby asked, when the lease is executed, what is the timeline to collect the deposit check?
For me, immediately. So that's, a lot of times they'll at least get the deposit check immediately there. But every time I've done a transaction, and I've done very few leases, by the way, I always get the both checks simultaneously. So, and it should be at the when you sign the lease.
All right. A lot of leasing questions coming in today for us. So here, Claudia has a question. The seller wants to force the buyer to use a waiver after executed contract before appraisal. Does the buyer have options if seller terminates?
So I want to force the buyer to use a waiver after the executed contract. I don't know how the seller can force them. So you've already got an agreement. I mean, you can change it with an amended. But I don't know what the buyer's motivation would be in amending that. And I had a circumstance the other day where somebody manipulated a buyer's agent and caused them to pay an extra $300. They were demanding, they wanted to close early. They were already scheduled to close on, I think it was like the 20th or the 18th of that month. They wanted to close on the 14th. They called the lender and said, can you close earlier? And said, well, we'll do what we can, but I can't guarantee we can close on that. Somehow or the listing agent caused them to modify the closing date to the 14th, which they could not make. And so now they're in default, and they kind of extorted the extra $3,000 from that buyer. That's why it's a time. And the way the contract reads, it says on or before. He never to change the time, it wasn't necessary. It just had to close by the 18th. And so there was no necessity for an amendment. So, and it doesn't relate directly to what Claudia says, but it does relate to the fact, you've already got an agreement. And why would you modify it?
Right.
It's a binding contract. It's our roadmap on how we do our transaction.
Okay, a few more things here for you, Rob. Rock said, could Rob discuss the change to the mandatory membership in a property owners association, paragraph C, fees and deposits for reserves, and who he thinks should be responsible for providing those amounts? Reaching an HOA for amounts needed for reserves deposits can be a challenge.
Well, I think yes, it is. But Senate Bill 1588 was passed. Hopefully it will make our life a little bit easier. And going forward, they made some requirements of those. I guess they're mainly management companies, might be associations, but that they are to get resale certificates within 7 days to you. They can't be more than $250. And they're supposed to post their documents on their websites. This should be help consumers considerably, but they actually moved D up to C, and now it's all kind of negotiated. So it's important to get that information, and if you can't get it from the listing agent, you might want to ferret that out yourself to protect your buyer. And I'm saying that's the other behavior I see out there, and it's not bad behavior. It's just a lot of times listing agents are filling out the property subject to mandatory homeowners association. They're checking off number 4. We don't require that information. Yes, we do. We want to know what kind of financial things that we are going to be facing as a buyer. And I've had a lot of stories where people found out after the fact, like recapitalization fees, and the other one was the one up in Kingwood, the fee simple townhouse. They found out after the fact, yeah, it was $50 a month plus $150 a month. They didn't have the documents. It's like that's really important information. So when you see that already checked out for you as a buyer's agent, yeah, don't even print it out. That's really a buyer agent function, is to help protect your buyer and get that information. And I've had several times had to go do it myself because I can't wait. We got it's a time sensitive document, so we net it. So if they don't want to do it, and the same thing on the other side. If the buyer's agent isn't doing it, I'm going to jump in and do it.
Yeah.
It's just I want a smooth transaction for my client.
Absolutely. A few more comments, and I know we're running close on time here, but I have a few more questions for you, Rob, and then I have some follow-up questions for you as well. And they're thanking you, by the way. Nellie just said, thank you, Rob, for clarifying all our questions. Nishan asked, could you comment on non-realty items addendum, since it's a part of the contract once signed by the buyer and seller for no money? Can the buyer not share this with his lender?
Yeah, the underwriters are kicking those back. And so what I recommend you do is just have your buyer and seller do a bill of sale, and they can write whatever language they want in there about being contingent on the sale of the house. But what happens is the underwriters are going, hey, wait a minute, this is not a $500,000 house. This is $480,000 house and $20,000 worth of stuff. And so the stuff probably needs to be on a separate form as far as the bill of sale. Usually washer, dryer, and refrigerator are not going to irritate an underwriter. But if you do a non-realty item, I would be very sure that you get specific and maybe take pictures what you expect to stay. Because in my contracts house, I got all sorts of stories about things that walked out of the house that were supposed to stay, and some vice versa. But yeah, and if you're having to watch your refrigerator, make sure you get the serial numbers on it. That's the one you expect to stay, and put that in the non-realty, and hopefully your underwriter doesn't kick it out. And again, if they do, it's kind of like the golden rule. He who has the gold makes the rules, and sometimes lenders are making those kind of rules.
Okay.
Do it that way, and be clear. Of course, now we can do a whole another class on just the smart items and things like that.
Yeah.
And I know we just don't have the time.
Yeah. Nishan followed up. So bill of sale is fine.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, I don't know if you want to write that yourself. I don't want you to be accused of drawing an agreement and practicing law, but they can do a bill of sale between themselves. They're both wanting the same things.
Right.
And they go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, so some common things I'm hearing from you, Rob. One is to be specific, and two is don't practice law, practice real estate.
Violation of Article 13 of the Code of Ethics.
Yes, very good. Booker had a question here, wanted to know your thoughts. I had a listing agent asking me to place waiver of appraisal in the special provision of the 1-to-4 for an FHA loan. Didn't seem ethical. Your thoughts? You're shaking your head.
Yeah, I think that kind of, I guess I can't hide that body language. No, it's not for FHA loans, it's for conventional loans only, and you don't waive it.
Okay. Demetrius said, what is the proper use of section 6D? Many agents merely insert residential dwelling.
Yeah, Demetrius, that's a really great question. We dwell on that a lot in Legal Update 1. It is really designed for the use of the home. And if you put a single family dwelling, it's not going to hurt anything. This is about prohibitive use. And I'll give you a great example. You want to go buy a property, but you want to use it for Airbnb. Now, and so once you get your documents from the title company and commitments and things like that, you see in the deed restriction, I can't have Airbnb. You can terminate, because you put in there, is there a prohibition against Airbnb? And it might be other things. In Legal Update 1, they use the example of a potbelly pig. And it was a TREC case where they actually, the pig got picked up by animal control because the neighbor turned them in. You're not allowed to have swine. So, find out how your person wants to use it. A lot of people right now want to put a tiny house in the backyard. Well, not every subdivision is going to allow two dwellings on a piece of land. So you might put that in. I want to be able to put a tiny home on there. But it's about the use of the property. And of course, if there's something simple like a fence that might be meandering over the property lines, you can write, I'm objecting to the fence exception of the title thing. The seller has 15 days to cure it, and the buyer has 5 days to accept that cure. And if the buyer doesn't terminate in that time period, they're waiving their rights to terminate.
Okay. Just a lot of people thanking you for all this information. You're really helping out our members right now, Rob. Big question here. Just what do you feel is one of the more costly mistakes realtors are making right now?
You know the biggest mistake is not communicating. And the number one complaint from consumers is not picking up the phone to communicate. And a lot of times we're afraid to pick up the phone because we maybe have something we don't want to tell our clients. There's a book out there called Eat That Frog. Whatever you have on your list to do today, do the one that's the least appealing. Do that one first, and then do the other one. Not communicating. I think that's probably the number one thing that hurts people. And people have lost clients. I had somebody the other day that lost control of their buyer, and they had a buyer's rep agreement. And we know how important that buyer's rep agreement is. That edifies your position. In Texas, though, you can represent somebody orally by, you're doing action, they're accepting your actions, and therefore you're giving advice and opinions and doing CMAs. You're doing buyer agent activity, and they're accepting it. So you are a buyer's agent at that point. But it's really best to protect you, and especially if you get an intermediary, you have to have a buyer's agent rep sign. So that's a really important form to sign. And you may not want to do it on the first day out, because I always tell people, hey, we're going to date for one day before we get married. And so, I want to work with somebody first, see how we work together. But communicate, I think, is the number one error that realtors make, and I hear stuff that happens all the time for that lack of communication.
Okay, very good. As you know, Rob, we have a wide range of realtors that watch our program, from brand new agents to seasoned brokers. What's one thing you'd recommend for everyone watching, new or seasoned?
It's a dynamic industry. In other words, it's ever changing, and we've seen some changes. I mean, look at our contract alone. Our 1-to-4 changed, as of April 1. All these massive changes, but education. If you got in the business 20 years ago, it's not the same thing it was 20 years ago. Things have changed. Technology has changed, and of course, we have not been the first industry to embrace technology, but it's an important piece of what we do. It might put you outside your comfort zone, but make sure you understand the technology has been used out there nowadays to do your business.
Okay, very good. And is there anything else that you want to share? Any other recommendations or resources that you want to share with our members today?
You have some great resources. Well, first of all, you've got the most amazing staff on the planet, because I promise you, I travel all over the country looking at other associations. You have the best staff of all time. They're a great resource. I've never seen them not be helpful. The other resources, you've got a great world-class website, hr.com. You can access a lot of information off that. Same thing with Texas Realtors. There's a lot of things on Texas Realtors, a lot of articles, same HAR. NAR has a lot of great stuff in there. Of course, we're getting pushed a lot of information. It's free to HR members because of Brad and Bob's relationship. So a lot of those articles are just, will tell you a lot of what's going on in the industry. We know that we always talk about the lion coming over the hill. Well, let me tell you, the lion's already over the hill, but you better know who that lion is. And that's where you're going to learn a lot of that industry stuff that's happening out there right now.
All right. Very good. And we did put a link to the Texas Realtors website in the comments.
Yeah.
As Rob said, lots of resources there. I'm pretty sure you can go to their website and search contracts and find all kinds of information.
And there, can I do a little personal plug?
Sure.
Chris Kelso is my co-host, and I do a weekly live radio show called the Real Estate Rat Pack, 9 o'clock Saturday mornings. We bring on experts. We brought on politicians. We bring on all walks of life, and we always have great. We had somebody, a CPA / attorney on, who scared the heck out of me. But this is the kind of information. So it's considered a resource. It's free, and if you're ever interested in coming on, contact Christina. She'll get in touch with me. Or you can, if you want me to, I can give my phone number. I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, maybe you can go back into the comments after this and reply to anybody that may ask or want to connect with you. You can connect with them there.
Okay.
Yeah, but so many of our members are thanking you, Rob, for this great information. Somebody said you nailed it. Education is key. Marcia Fisk said education with 3 exclamation points. Agreed. So a lot of people are thanking you and saying you did a great job today. Sandy said, what is the radio station again? If you could repeat that about the real estate rat pack.
100.7 FM, Saturdays at 9 o'clock.
Saturdays at 9 a.m. Well, great, Rob. This has been wonderful. Thank you. We'll have to have you back sometime when you have some updates for us, or if you have any
Absolutely.
breaking news or important things that you want to share with us.
Well, I get great stuff every week. So.
I'm sure you do. Well, with that, we'll go ahead and end today's show. And thank you again, Rob, for your time this morning. Thank you to you, our members that are watching. Do not forget, if you are watching this on Monday, you have until 5 p.m. today, Monday, to vote for the 2022 Board of Directors. Be sure to do so before 5 p.m. today on Monday. And also, go take a look. Virtual Engage registration is now open, so you can register for our Virtual Engage conference. I saw a few comments of people saying they registered during this program. So be sure to go register for Virtual Engage. And I hope you all have a great week. We'll see you next Monday at 9 a.m. Bye-bye.